All right, do you all want to get started then, or do you want to wait a little bit longer? I think we've got everyone who confirmed that they would be here. I think it was just Darla said she might be here, but possibly late, so. All right, I will go ahead and get us started, and something happened to my note taking already. That's good. Just a second, all my columns on my notes resorted themselves. All right, so I will call us to order at 7:02. I think that might be a record for a start. Good, thanks for everyone joining. So I'm taking over notes and things from last meeting. And then through email, I went ahead and decided to pre-nominate myself for the next meeting unless somebody else wants to do it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you, and I won't fight you for it. But if
okay, I may next month I may miss the meeting. I'm not sure, but in March I probably will. So
Okay.
that's why I figured do a
Stack
couple in a
your
row.
deck
Yeah. All right. So on our agenda, I kind of jumped ahead, but committee introductions. So I'm Trevor Wilson on the committee. I don't think we were doing the icebreakers much anymore because we want to save time for other things. So in here also,
Krista Seringo.
We also have Jim here. So the three of us at the committee or at Holly Hall. Who's online then?
I can go. Brian Plant, committee member, Firehouse Apartments here in Bristol.
Quarter night community member.
Tabitha Moore, consultant.
Jessica Teets, community member.
Right. That's everybody. Thank you. So then the next was just to approve the December notes. Were there any changes or corrections anyone had from the December notes? The one thing I noted, because I didn't have it to put in the notes, was the list that Inica put together of who volunteered for what group. So I'll reach out to her and see if she still has that. And that way I can update it for the notes for this month. I did go back, Porter, to one of your emails where you have the link to the live document, so I can update it there for the notes. All right, then we're on to public comment period already. Any comments? No?
Nothing here.
No comments? All right. Any addition items to the agenda? Yeah.
I don't know if it's an agenda item to add or one that we should start to address, given the recent executive orders that have come out and the nature of this group. It is a conversation I've been having since Monday with all of my clients and the Attorney General. So I just wanted to make sure that we address so that you feel prepared and supported.
I really appreciate you bringing that up, Tabitha. And I would suggest that we maybe put that at the top of our agenda.
Mm-hmm. Think of the nicest way to put that into notes.
It would be understanding the recent presidential executive orders and their meaning for this group.
You said and reason for the group, right?
And no, not reason for the group. And it wasn't meeting. What was the word? I just said it.
Impact.
Meaning for the group.
So
I have lots of words in my head all the time, but never know which one's coming up.
no, that's a good one. Unless anyone else disagrees, I think that's I think that's very much probably where we should start things tonight. Our other business, we had continued work with you, Tabitha, reviewing the outreach that we may or may not have been able to do since the last meeting, which included the conversations in the community and the postcard and survey, and then learning with you, Jessica, around focus groups. And then I think Porter, I think you were going to also do an update on Tabitha's contract, correct? Or you were planning to?
Actually, I don't have any information because with the town administrator leaving, I have no method for a conversation. Tabitha might be able to give us that information, but yeah. And actually, I would say, just to be respectful of Tabitha's time, maybe if we're going to do it, maybe move that up, because I don't know, Tabitha, if you're going to stay or if you're going to go after we talk about some core value. I don't know what point you'll be departing, so I don't know if that's before or after our focus group conversation.
Yeah.
And
I'm
also
supposed to.
the different things that people said about their experiences over the last month or so with outreach, member conversations, the community, and Darla's not being able to get to the postcard and survey. I think that those three things we might just sort of like bump to next time. But maybe some people have had more engagement in the community than we've heard of. But I think a lot of people found that there's just a tough time of year.
I started making some efforts, but I didn't get real far, so we can save that for whenever.
And it feels like a good opportunity to kind of contextualize and reset maybe, or see where we are.
So how do you want to start?
So I'm happy to lead off, and I don't know if folks have seen, but obviously the president was inaugurated on Monday, and on that day, I think it was a total of 20 or 25 executive orders came out. 5 in particular have significant impact on the work that you're trying to do. I want to start with probably the 2 most dangerous potentially ones in terms of protecting Vermonters. One is related to immigration and immigration law, and I'm going to put these in the chat so that you can include them. My recommendation is that you read them. Here's what I'll say. Don't get overwhelmed yet. The Vermont Attorney General's office has been working diligently, and I'll talk to, actually, I'm going to put that in there second so that you can read that along with the executive order. So, oh, whoops, that's the same one. Sorry about that. I meant to send you this link. You're gonna get a lot of links from me tonight because this is kind of, oh, go ahead.
And we'll have those just for logistics. Can we copy those and put them into notes before we close out of the meeting?
I think so, and I'm joining the meeting on my computer so I can copy them from there too.
Sorry, Tabitha.
Yeah, no worries.
So I want to make sure I get the links.
So the first 2 that I sent, and I accidentally sent the first one twice. The first is the executive order called Protecting the American People Against Invasion. And it is calling for increase in ICE and Border Patrol. Actually, one of the things that the president has done is lifted the ban on ICE invading schools and other public spaces, allowing them to go in and detain whomever they want. So immediately, oh, am I frozen? I look frozen to me. Can you hear me? Okay, there we go.
We can hear you.
Okay, I don't know what's going on. So immediately, and the second link there from Vermont Public, Vermont Attorney General Charity Clark, along with 22 other states, filed a lawsuit claiming that this is unconstitutional on the grounds that birthright citizenship, first of all, is a constitutional given. And then there's a number of other pieces that relate to this particular executive order that will be important for folks to understand. What the lawsuit means is nothing can go into effect in that executive order until the lawsuit is settled. We know that there's a strategy among a number of states across the US, across a number of the executive orders that have come out. So this was the first one because we know that our immigrant populations are most at risk. And here in Vermont, we had a terrible incident happen this past week where one of our Border Patrol agents was murdered by a allegedly a white individual with an active visa. So there was no illegal immigration happening in that situation, and the person was not brown. So it sounds a little flippant, but at the same time, we know what is more likely to increase a potentially violent response. So that particular piece is one to familiarize yourself with. I know we want to make sure that we're taking care of Vermont folks, and that becoming a welcoming community means that we look at the needs that people may be having. So as you go about this work of trying to reach out and find people in different communities, including your immigrant community, it will be important to have credible messengers. It'll be important to make sure that those of you who are reaching out have deep relationships and understanding with the folks who are most at risk in the Bristol community. So questions about that, number one.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. And I guess the first is just a statement that this is really hard for me to talk about and think about, and I'm sure for everyone. So I just want to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
But anyway, I guess one of my questions was about the first executive order. And when you said that nothing can happen until those suits are resolved, does that include the ability to go into schools or places of worship, or all of those things?
I'm waiting because, again, I'm not a lawyer, but I do talk to a lot of them. And I've asked the Attorney General's office today. He said, I was speaking with Julio Thompson, who's the head of the Civil Rights Unit. And he said, what do you think people need? I said, well, I think municipalities and schools and anybody who receives federal funding needs clarity on what they can and can't do, because these executive orders came out and said within 60 days, you have to X, Y, Z. And so clarifying for folks as you're doing this kind of litigation process, I guess, or strategy that you and the other states have, clarifying for folks here what this means as far as the work that they can do will be critical. So my hope is that guidance will be forthcoming. Minimally, we've got at least 60 days before some of this stuff kicks in, but I haven't made it through all 25 of the orders yet, or even all 5 of the ones that seem particularly relevant to your work. But this, to me, is one of the most immediately threatening to your community and to Vermont in general. So that was the first one that the Attorney General has spoken out about. Read the article, you can see where she is with it. And again, always reach out. Feel free to write to her, her office, and say, what do we do in the meantime? Especially because I know you do have a bigger, kind of a bigger community of immigrant folks in your area. Okay. So when in doubt, contact the Attorney General's office before you act.
And I just wanted to add that the executive order is for birthright citizenship. So those are people who are born in the United States. The president has control over immigration policy. So if somebody is here on an illegal status, this doesn't impact them. They're covered under normal immigration laws. And the safe sanctuary cities was struck down by the courts. So theoretically, local law enforcement cannot impede ICE if they do want to raid a particular place. But what a lot of states have been doing is just not helping. And, they found sort of workarounds, but federal law trumps state law here. So this is a different category. So these are people who were born in the United States, and in the past we've assumed, not assumed, the Constitution says that they are citizens. And so this would be trying to get rid of that citizenship. Sorry, I just wanted to add that in, Tabitha.
Please, I am not an expert. Mhm.
Is it retroactively get rid of it or just from now on? So like if I have a baby right now, under this new law, maybe it wouldn't be a US citizen, but if I have a child who's 8 years old,
Well, until they change the Constitution, I don't understand how this could go into effect. Like, you would have to change the Constitution. So I think you're right. I think that there's probably more threat for people who are pregnant right now or who will be pregnant in the future, that there could be some sort of fancy legal work to figure out how to get around that. But unless they are able to change the Constitution, this can't be removed. I think it's a little bit of political theater, but it doesn't mean that there won't be real consequences and real fear, you know?
And when people don't have enough information and they feel like they can be citizen soldiers, that has the
Yeah.
potential to put your community at risk as well. So making sure that we're taking care of everybody, making sure everybody is aware of what is actually required will be critical. Okay. And so I would recommend being in deep contact with the AGO, Attorney General's office, about what do we do? And like I said, I asked earlier if they could put some stuff together for municipalities, anybody that receives federal funding of any kind.
So when you say like be in contact with the AGO and then you're saying like materials for municipalities, is that something that like our select board should be responsible for initiating, or is that something that we as a committee should just decide whether or not we might want to do, or both, or
Yeah, I think that's kind of an internal decision between you and the select board. However, you know, like it wouldn't hurt to say, hey, we know that these executive orders are coming out. We're happy to run point on trying to find out clarity from the Attorney General's office, unless you would like to do that. Either way, let's make sure that we're all kind of on the same page.
You mentioned the federal funding. Is that, I mean, maybe I missed that before, but are we receiving that as a committee? I mean, I know as members, we're all volunteer, but is there some tie to federal funding that we're linked to?
Well, I mean, I would certainly ask your select board, because if your town receives federal funding and you are a subcommittee of your
Committee of
select
town.
board. Okay.
We can, yeah, your image freezes every once in a while, but we can still hear you, Tabitha.
Oh, sorry. I'm just gonna like sit here stoically so I don't end up looking totally foolish. So again, I would recommend that you minimally have the conversation and you know, start to just be prepared. The next one actually that I think is incredibly threatening is called the Defending Women from Gender Ideology Extremism and Restoring Biological Truth to the Federal Government. I managed to make it through that without too many facial expressions, I hope. And what this one does is say that there are only two sexes and they're based on biology, which is fascinating because if you know anything about what determines sex, you know that it's actually not as exact and precise as we were taught in the 80s and 90s. And obviously well before that. So, and what else is interesting about this executive order is that it pretends that intersex people don't exist. So there's a lot of flaws. There's a lot of flaws in all of these, but ultimately with this one, it's saying that you can only have men and women, and that men have to go with men and women have to be with women. And that's, again, we're erasing a lot of people from our community. And so as you are trying to figure out how does Bristol be a welcoming community and not violate, well, it doesn't even technically really, I think, exist yet. I'm not sure if the set of lawsuits have come out about that one yet. So it's important to understand that, and then how that is going to affect things. I mean, the first thing it says is sex shall refer to an individual's immutable biological classification as either male or female. Sex is not a synonym for and does not include the concept of gender identity. And what's so fascinating, it says immutable biological classification. And as I just explained, there is no such thing. There are trends, but there's nothing immutable. So that one's coming up. And so we know that our LGBTQIA+ community is deeply threatened. The third one actually is directly related to this work. And it is called Ending Radical and Wasteful Government DEI Programs and Preferencing. And basically what that one says is you can't do this work anymore if you receive federal funding. And I haven't had a chance to dive in 100%, but it's some of the language is just like, it doesn't make sense. It goes against itself. It equates DEI with affirmative action. There's a lot of muddied language in there that doesn't actually clarify some things. This is one where they said we want within 60 days, we want going back to November 4th of 2024, any monies that you've expended, any positions that you've hired. I mean, there's a lot in there. And it's like, I don't know that you can go back to November 4th of 2024 if you weren't the president. But so again, a lot of ambiguity and lack of clarity. So hopefully the Attorney General's office will be providing us with more guidance. But it's important for you to know that these things are out there, and it wouldn't be surprising for someone to come and say, you're in violation of, and minimally, at least for 60 days, you're fine.
This doesn't relate to this committee's work, but I don't know if it's helpful to share like a specific contextual example, that I'm working with the Vermont Family Network now, which serves families of children with disabilities and special health needs. And we have a big federal grant that helps to fund our organization and others like it. And we are writing now, my boss has been spending days and days writing up the materials for the new funding. And she and all the other parent centers across the country are wondering about whether or not to include the word equity, which has always been a cornerstone of thinking about folks with disabilities. Nowhere in our applications do we talk about diversity, equity, or diversity, equity and inclusion in that way. But it's just an example of the fear, even if it doesn't come to fruition, of how to continue to serve folks in what seems like a really uncertain time. So anyway,
And I was thinking today too about the many people in the government who are being put on leave and very soon likely to lose their jobs, and now they've just been put in a position where they need help as well, just because of their work to try and work towards DEI policies and improvement.
Yeah. What the executive orders don't do is take away civil rights, first of all, protected classes. They can't take away protected classes. And they cannot take away your responsibility to ensure that you are not discriminating in everything that you do. So minimally, I would recommend using language from the Civil Rights Act. If you're, if you want to be conservative at this point and be like, we're going to move away from DEI, protected classes is the way that I would kind of head toward. Because everything that you're trying to do in becoming a welcoming community, number one, is about your community health and well-being. Sorry, I gotta pick this guy up. And number two is also about, ensuring that you're doing right by your protected classes in terms of their ability to access what the town of Bristol offers. So those might be some of the shifts. Now, I will say that last piece of guidance is really fascinating because it says, in any attempt to rebrand, DEI will be sniffed out. Okay, well, we can drop DEI. We're going to be all about protected class protections and ensuring that we're doing right by our, by everyone on the grounds of protected class identity, or protected class if you don't want to put identity in there. So those are 3 of the 5 that I've managed to get through.
I'll just piggyback on that this committee was formed specifically by the select board to implement the town's declaration of inclusion, which explicitly references those protected classes. So I think that as an equity committee, whatever you're called, it's probably fine. So, I mean, I think that it's good to be aware that there will be some who will feel that this is work that shouldn't be happening. They felt that before, they may continue to feel that. But as far as legal grounds to continue the work, I don't think that there's any concerns there.
Do you think it puts any reason that we should put more focus on protected classes as the groups that we're reaching out to? Because our list of groups, I think, you could probably argue, there's probably sides that you could argue about. Some of the groups that we looked at don't necessarily fall into protected classes, at least as I understand them. And is there, I don't personally feel that there's any need to do that. I'm just posing the question. Yeah.
No, I think that you need to go with what you have, because your idea was to become a welcoming community and to get information from everybody. And so I think it actually gives credence to the fact that you're trying to reach all of the different types of communities who seem to exist. And, one of the things that we need to do away with is kind of assuming that protected class only means brown, queer, disabled. All race is protected. What we know, though, because of the civil rights, law enforcement, is that in keeping demographic statistics, some groups are more protected than others. And those tend to be the brown people, the queer people, and so it becomes an effort to, how do we equalize treatment, experience, hiring, all of those things along the lines of protected class. And like you said, some of those communities you're reaching out to are not protected classes, and that's okay.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I mean, to me, we're reaching out to the community. So, we have the idea of protected classes, but at least as a committee, we're trying to reach, every group within the community.
Right.
Regardless of protection or not, because the community wants to include everybody. That's kind of our directive, right?
Yeah. And so in order to protect everybody, you have to also know who's most at risk. And so that's your link. Yeah, I think, some guidance I've heard from folks, in DEI leadership, talking to the rest of their organizations, is remember that you are, and you in this case are representing the municipality in this meeting. And so you want to avoid partisan politics as you talk about this. This isn't about Republicans or Democrats. This is about civil rights. And this is about people's rights being infringed upon. So that's my very brief 2 days in information that I have for you. When in doubt, ask the Attorney General's office. I think that's my best advice for now. I am not a legal protection. I'm here to try to help support you as you do this work.
Would you do me a favor? The first couple links that you put in, would you re-put them in? For some reason,
Yes.
I can't get to them on my computer.
Yeah, I got it. It's probably because you were joining after. So there's the first one on
Thank you.
birthright citizenship. And then the second one is the article by VPR explaining Attorney General Clark's position in solidarity with the other 22 states. I do believe it will be, I think it's coming up in California first, if I'm not mistaken. It's a lot to track. So.
It's a lot to absorb.
Yeah. Yeah. And I haven't fully absorbed it yet either. So. Okay. Any questions from folks? This is difficult and this is painful, but as I tell folks, we've been dealing with this for hundreds of years. DEI is just the latest terminology that's meant to encompass liberation. And it's less about the terminology that we use than the practice of protecting the most vulnerable in our community and ensuring that we are doing right by our community, by our people. So, okay. All right, so that is done. Should we move on to the next item?
I just want to ask real quick for, around that, because the way that we do notes, I don't feel that there was any real action item other than that we just need to make sure that we are, when in doubt, reaching out to the Attorney General's office, to the select board. But was there a specific action that we wanted to take that I should make sure I note?
Yes, you want to talk to your select board about who is going to be talking to the Attorney General and who's going to be running lead on gaining clarity about some of the executive orders that seem in conflict with this work.
Is there anyone that would like to take that action?
I can tell you that that this is going to be for the new town administrator. We have an offer out and we should hear back in 2 days. So we should have the name of that person and can put you in touch with them hopefully soon.
Okay. Thank you, Jessica. All right. Well, I think we are on to the next one, Tabitha.
All right, that's me again.
Yeah.
And I think what we wanted to do, because we all went through the end of year, how many 57 holidays kind of blur. Where are we right now in terms of the outreach piece? Do we still need to come up with the questions that we're going to ask, or did we do that the last time we got together? I feel like we did that the last time you all met. You were going to take the core values questions and then you were going to do some outreach to different communities. Oh, one more thing. I do think that the other specific action item would be that if you haven't reached out yet to communities and communities who are in particular impacted by the executive orders, that you do so with extreme care.
Mhm.
And like I said in the beginning, your trusted kind of go-betweens will be critical as well. So, have folks done any of the outreach yet? Yeah, Brian?
A little bit.
How's it going?
Flow. Started with the piece I'm most acquainted with, which was the homeless community. Reached out to the John Graham shelter in Virgins, see if they'd be willing to participate in any particular fashion, even if it was just helping facilitate some folks or looking for volunteers. They have declined any sort of involvement. I have reached out and I'm waiting I need to call again. One of the contacts at Addison Housing Works, since I'm on the board there, she used to work with Pathways, so she may still have some connections, but we just haven't synced as far as coming up with some ideas. And I did a little groundwork with one of my neighbors who happens to, for veteran community, that spends a fair amount of time at the local Legion. He was up for kind of, giving me that in, but I have to reconnect with him. And then I was going to check with Porter, just haven't got there, as far as, because she was involved with the Veterans Town Hall. If she thought I should just send an email to Kristen, I believe it was, that kind of sets that up, to get a contact for I wanted to reach out to Trevor mentioned it last time, the gentleman, and I don't remember his name, I'm sorry.
John.
Kind of the host, and kind of facilitated getting, people coming up.
Yeah, he lives nearby. I have his email. I can send it to you, Brian.
Okay, thank you. So
If you want to try that, Brian, because I tried going through the Veterans Town Hall website to try and reach him, and took a couple weeks, and then someone responded and said they were forwarding my email to him, but then I never heard anything. So if you want to try next, I think that'd be great, and we can see who can reach him.
I actually know John pretty well.
Oh, you do?
Okay.
Yeah. And I'd be happy to talk to him. I guess what I'm wondering about, I wasn't at the December meeting, and I don't think I signed up to reach out to particular groups yet. So I'm a little bit behind so I apologize. But I guess I'm wondering is the hope to convene a group of folks, or to just have more info? Have we talked about like what would work best for different groups of folks? And I guess it's a question just recognizing how hard it is to get people together in one place, especially people who, are experiencing a variety of different barriers already. For example, if I think about trying to connect with families of kids with disabilities, like it's that same conversation of, how best to do that. So for like the vet community, for example, like I'm totally happy to connect with John, but what exactly is my ask? Do we know yet what that ask is?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give my interpretation,
Yeah.
which was, we kind of have multiple layers is the way I kind of took it, is trying to start just informal conversations with a focus on the questions that we had put together, but not necessarily having to stick to them like a script or something. And then Darla was going to work on a postcard and also an online survey that we could use. If we couldn't actually have a full conversation with someone, we could give them like a takeaway, like, hey, if you don't want to speak to me now, would you mind doing this to respond? And that's kind of where I understood we're at, right?
But am I asking John as just an individual, or as a way to connect with other vets, or as a
I would say
representative?
both. Yeah, whatever he's comfortable with is what I would say.
And no pressure on it. It's just, since he's has worked with the Vets Town Hall.
Yeah. I mean, he's super
at the very
connected
least,
with that community.
To help, set up a group meet of some sort, or help point us and help us go in the right direction, see why we can how to help everybody else as well.
Yep.
But yeah,
Okay.
as far as it was open to whether they just wanted to answer questions via web thing, or if we wanted to do some sort of video chat, or a little more formal sit down, or one-on-one. It's kind of was left up to whatever made people you're trying to engage with the most comfortable.
Yeah. Okay. So even just getting that feedback from John, like, what's the best way to connect with some folks in this community?
It looks like, Porter, you posted the questions and things in the comments. So I've got that. So Jessica, I think you had a question or comment.
So I was just wondering if you had thought about, so it sounds like you might be doing some interviews where you talk to people, that you might do a survey, and that you also might want to do focus groups. The kind of information that you collect through those methods are very, very different. And sometimes people like to cascade them. Like sometimes people like to do a survey, which is like broad brush stroke. You don't get a ton of detail, but you can see trends, right? Like, do people all think a certain way about a certain thing? And then once you capture those, it can help you then write focus group questions or interview questions. you don't have to do it that way. Like, this isn't research that you're publishing or something. So, I mean, it's not like you have to have this like rigorous methodology. But there are good reasons to try to do one sort of methodology before the other, just that it might inform more of what you're doing. Because like with a focus group, for example, you would only want to ask maybe like 3 to 5 questions. That'll take an hour. But if you waste your 3 to 5 questions on something that everybody agrees with, that was kind of a wasted opportunity. The focus groups are really better where you like generate not disagreement, but like discussion and sort of identity formation or figuring things out through discussion. And so, like, if you find on the survey that everybody says, 10, strongly agree, then that wouldn't be a good focus group question, or maybe even a good interview question. So I didn't know if you had a particular order in which you wanted to do things, or if it was more like convenience, like whatever people would agree to is what you're happy to do.
I don't know, in my mind, I figured it was informal kind of conversations first, because that's also partly how we would find people who might be interested in being in a focus group, or know people who might be interested in that. That was just my personal thinking on it. And since we hadn't gotten to training with you yet about focus groups, so I've been part of focus groups, but they were work related, so it's not like anything like what we're trying to do, I'm sure.
Yeah, they can be really good at trying to answer. I mean, it seems like from what I heard at your last meeting and what Tabitha was talking about, that it's sort of like setting community values or discovering different identities and like where they might overlap or where they might not. And that kind of work can be really good in a focus group, but focus groups are group information. So like if I stay quiet, like if Tabitha says something and I totally disagree with her, but I don't want to do that, I might just stay quiet and you wouldn't be able to collect that information. So that's where doing like one-on-one interviews or surveys are really good. The problem with surveys is if you get the question wrong, or if people don't understand what you're asking, you just have, it's trash in, trash out, right? Like you don't have anything good there. But if you could do interviews first, that could be really good, because then you could collect what the categories are that people are referencing, and then figure out like 3 to 5 ways to sort of ask different questions about that can sort of force that conversation. Like I was just doing focus groups with Chinese students who are studying abroad at Middlebury College, trying to figure out if they support the values of democracy more in their 4th year than they did in their 1st year, because their high school civics education is all in an authoritarian country that doesn't value free speech or these other things. And what was really interesting about that process is talking about those sort of democratic values. It was really interesting to see how people pulled them apart. And like, if I had gone into it, I would have said like, okay, these are the key democratic values and people have got to support this. But what the students picked as important in their discussions were not the ones that I would have picked. So that's what the questions can be really good for, is like forcing that conversation. So through the conversation, you can see like what people thought was important, but sort of what they then agree or disagree about. So that just might be a way to think about, if you're doing these interviews or informal conversations, just to keep track of these categories. Like, where do you think you could get good discussion about values or identities?
I have an observation. I think that one of the reasons why people were challenged to have these informal conversations over these last 2 months was partly holidays and illness, but I think also a real lack of clarity on individual committee members' parts, or lack of confidence in what am I asking people and how am I going to gather that data and what do I do with that data. And I feel like, I'm not a committee member, but I'm still not entirely sure how we're going to ensure that if 5 different committee members are asking, 30 different community members any version of these 4 questions, how those people, the committee members, capture the information, bring it back to the group in order for us to turn that into a meaningful survey, or take the next step with focus groups?
Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to articulate. Thanks, Porter. Um, I wonder what it would be like if, again, using John as an example, you know, if I have him as a person to go to say, we have this survey, will you help us get it to some folks in the vet community? And maybe Trevor has a contact in a different demographic that we want to hear from, and you do the same thing, and maybe Brian has the same thing. And that way we know that our survey will hopefully bring back some diversity of responses
Mhm.
that would then help us to have a better sense of what we could ask in a focus group, or even just at the basic level that it is a somewhat representative response from folks other than the ones that are probably most likely to participate in a survey like this.
And for the
Right.
survey,
Could it work that way? Like if we had these 3 questions and we just tried to recruit people to do the
for
survey?
the answer for the survey, I haven't seen what it looks like. Are these open-ended survey questions where people will be typing answers, or would they be selecting like from a Likert scale?
Yeah, I don't know if that was decided. I mean,
Yeah,
the
so
questions like
there is no survey yet. So
No.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
the 3
It was-
questions that were posed.
But these were
Yeah.
more this informal conversation questions, I think.
Gotcha.
So it sounds
Right.
like this is like a 3-step deal. Like first is, yeah, Tabitha's like, that's what you were gonna say, right?
Yes. When we started this, the goal was for us to have some preliminary data from folks that would kind of feed what would go into the survey and the focus
Gotcha.
group questions.
Okay. All right.
So informal conversations, then survey, then focus group. I think that's a good way to go. I mean, the problem with surveys and like broad identity or value questions is that you sort of have no idea. So you either write them so narrowly that people, they would like to select more than one option, but they feel like they have to pick one. So like, is that good information? Or it's so broad that you can't really capture much information. So surveys can be challenging. There sometimes when people do like identity based surveys, and I don't know if Tabitha has good examples, but the ones that I've seen really try to get more at real, and again, I'm a political scientist, so the ones that I'm seeing are like political values, political identities. So it's really focused on that. But they ask really broad questions like, would you live next to somebody of a different ethnicity? They sort of ask big questions like that. Would you be okay with your child marrying someone from a different ethnicity, the same gender, right? Like, and those questions are all trying to get at sort of tolerance of difference, celebration of diversity, those sorts of things. And so a lot of those questions, then you sort of have to pick out these values like toleration and then figure out like, how could you ask a question in a way that it isn't exactly obvious what you're trying to ask so that people don't feel like they need to pick the right answer, but also will give you enough information to know what people really are saying. So they can be pretty challenging. If you wanted to do open questions where you simply said like, what values do you hold, or, whatever you wanted to frame, if you collect that information, then I could show you how to use, there's a free program and a program that I have access to. We could do either one, but it will allow you to look at word occurrence. So like the basic one is frequency counts, like you guys have seen word clouds, something like that. But the better stuff is like seeing what phrases hang together. And you can go out sort of 2 words, 3 words, 4 words. Like if I say diversity, do I always then use a positive word, like a positive affinity after it? So there are different ways of trying to measure it if you want to just let people type into it. So those are some of the dilemmas that you'll need to tackle. I mean, the best way is just to go ahead and write the questions, and then we can all take it, right? You test it, give it to your family and your friends, and then see what you get. And does it make any sense to you? Like, does it tell you anything? Or do people complain and they're like, I have no idea how to answer this? Like, one of the questions I used for my Chinese students was, if you had to pick between freedom and security, what would you pick? And they're like, that's a horrible question. Like, I don't want to pick between those two things. But you know, what was interesting is all of the US students said they would prefer freedom, and all of my Chinese students said they would prefer security. So I guess it does measure something, even though they all hated it. But you want to try to test your questions and see what you get.
And again, we're not looking for like, as you know, right? We're not looking for a massively validated study that we could then go on empirically and publish, but what is going to guide the development of the core principles? And if I remember, Bristol adopted the Articles of Inclusion, or the and I feel like that might be a good place. So even though we don't want to be so narrow and specific that we prevent people from, saying things that aren't in there, that might be a good place to start to kind of, as we develop the survey. So we're going to finish gathering the informal data, take a look at that in relationship to the Articles of Inclusion, and say, hey, Jessica, are there some things here, like, what are some questions? And I'm with you. Everybody is surveyed out. And so I love the creative way that Porter, the group that you led earlier, right, by putting the mural up, like, what do we value or whatever, was it in Shaw's or something?
I don't remember.
Poems for Bristol, that one.
Yeah.
Oh,
Like doing something like that, like what's important to the town of Bristol.
oh,
And,
like
like,
love notes,
yeah, love notes. But, so maybe you have like, I don't know if you've ever been to Dick's Sporting Goods. Follow me on this one. They used to have this thing where when you would walk out, like, it's like, how was our service today? And it had a green, a yellow, and a red little
I've seen
smiley
those, yeah.
face, and
Yeah.
like you could say which one,
Yeah.
right? And obviously, there's going to be jokesters that are going to mess around. But I mean, you could develop, kind of something along those lines where, as you're leaving any of the municipal offices, or as you're leaving or entering, an event, where like you could say, pick the 3 values on here that are most important to you, and leave something like that open for 2 weeks, and give like 50 different types of values, and people can just go and
Mhm. That's a great idea. So to say, like, here's a statement that you can read. Out of this, can you pick out like the 2 or 3 things that you think are really important and we really need to be doing? And then can you pull out 2 things that you think are less important or you have questions about? And then if you wanted to do an activity where you could let them, so if you came up with, let's say, a list of like 20 values or 15 values or whatever you wanted, you could also let people drag them into their priority, like what is most important, what's second most important. And then we could look at their choices to see like what are the top 5 values. So there are ways to do it where you don't force people to pick. So reacting to the statement, or having a list that they can choose from and prioritize, those are all really good ways of doing it.
Can we do something like that with these questions? So we have these 4 questions that the committee considered a couple months ago. Can these 4 questions guide the informal conversations, and then have committee members in a notebook, when you're having the informal conversation, just capture those value words that people say, and then bring all those value words back, or the value word clusters back, and then have Jessica and or Tabitha work with us to create that into a survey?
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Does that sound doable, folks? So, and we had talked about these questions as being very, very general, in your own words or casual conversation, but what you're looking for is to extract value words, or to hear what value words people say in relation to these ideas about thriving, or at its best, or supported, valued.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
So I'm just rereading through the questions, and um, Yeah.
Okay.
What would we define kind of for the value words, I guess? Just to kind of make sure that I understand that. Like the core values specifically, or just kind of any words that, you know, when we're in the conversation that we feel kind of stand out to represent what, you know, the responses that they're giving us.
Yeah, you can ask, you know, say if you ask them, you know, so like, why do you still live in Bristol? What is it that keeps you here? Like, what do you love about it? And the things that they're telling you, that's telling them, you know, what's important to them. And those are the key words that you take forward. And then we can look at those in relationship to, you know, like the articles of inclusion, or we can just say like, this isn't something that's already part of the articles of inclusion. Maybe we need to do some more digging on this.
And if you collect all of that information in like a Word document or something like that from your conversations, I'll show you how to use, we can use the free software first, but it will then just tell you the frequency of the words, it'll rank them. And so that might help us then come up with what we want to use.
There's a bunch of websites that list sort of like core value words or whatever. So if you're just wondering like, what are the types of words I'm listening for? You can take a peek at that and it'll give you, you know, examples of things, but you'll hear it.
Yeah. I'm just trying to find ways to make sure that I'm not imposing my own biases when I'm listening to the words. That's my goal. If I guess
I mean,
should
I
have
was thinking
clarified
about that too, and
Yeah.
I think
I mean,
So the way
just-
that I typically,
safest way, right, is just to take notes of what you hear and then not try to interpret it
Yeah.
much at all.
Yeah.
ask the people if what you said is exactly what they, is this what you meant? I want to make sure that I'm capturing your words exactly. Is this what you meant? Is this the value that you're trying to tell me about? And they'll tell you yes or no.
That's good. Keep it simple.
Yeah, but I'm glad that you're thinking about your own biases and how those might, you know, influence or impact what you put out there. And if they give you one of those hesitating kind of yes, you can pretty much tell at that point that they're trying to maneuver, make themselves fit into what you said. And you say, oh, I heard you hesitate. Why don't you say it again so I understand what you're saying? You don't have to fit into what I'm saying. I need to make sure I reflect what you're saying. So if you
And if
hear people
they-
doing that,
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and if they're having trouble, like, you know, sometimes people can talk about these things really easily if you just ask them the question, but other people have never thought about it like that exactly. And so it's not that they can't answer the question, but they can't answer it in the way you're asking them. And so then if you ask them to tell you a story about a time that they felt this way, or that they observed something or experienced something, in the narrative story that they're going to tell you, they're not going to like give you 5 words, but they'll tell you a story and you can pull the words out of it and then repeat them back to them and say, this is what I hear you saying is important. You know, does this correspond with your experience?
All right.
so we feeling a little bit more kind of like we have some directive around the piece there. And then Brian, I'm really glad to hear that you were able to reach out. If you were able to pull out some keywords from folks and you want to plug them into that document that we were sharing, I can put it in the chat again if folks don't have it.
Sure.
That would be fabulous. Hold on.
Yep.
All right, and I just dropped it right in the chat again. And Jess, I think you have access to that as well. I think.
Yes.
Okay. So as you transfer your notes in, just we'll have it all in one spot. So if we have nothing else on that piece of it, did you want to say anything about my contract with you? Or do we need to go there?
Well, I mean, just for clarity, I think there were some questions. So there was $10,000 from Vermont Community Foundation. We've asked for an extension again. The money's sitting here. We have it in Bristol. $500 was spent helping the town administrator 18 months or so ago review job descriptions and whatnot for inclusive language. And then Tabitha worked with the committee and did some training. So essentially of that $10,000, $5,000 was for work with the consultant, which the town had chosen Tabitha previously. And that $5,000 was to do this core value work, which Tabitha is helping you do now, to help the town administrator with the job descriptions, which she's already done, to provide 4 hours of training. And it said in the grant, employees and staff, topics, audiences, delivery method to be determined with the equity committee. So this could count as that, or the committee may choose to use some of those hours elsewhere. And then lastly, the only thing of that $5,000 that hasn't been really addressed at all yet is supporting a town administrator with resources and information about what should be in an onboarding packet related to diversity, equity, inclusion. So that's something we hope the new town administrator will take on, because that poor person will be saddled with trying to make sure that the town is up to date with sexual harassment and other policies, which it isn't. So they have to do that anyway, and this can just be an addendum to that. So to that end, Tabitha, I don't know if you were able to get paid with that transition of.
No, I'll send it to you. So I'm a horrible biller. Like, I love doing the work and I hate billing. So I finally billed back in November, and I still haven't received it, but that's okay. I'll send that to you, Porter. In regard to the training, we've already used 3 hours. Technically, we used more, but that's fine. We just did 3 sessions. The How Bias Becomes Business 1 and 2, and then the core values training. And I think we reserved 1 so that when this person comes on, we can figure out jointly how we might want to use that in supporting your new town administrator. So
but
all of
there's-
that has been,
Yeah,
go ahead.
still time to be billed for the core value work. So
Yes.
essentially, I think we're fine. And then there's other money in that grant for community outreach, which was itemized in the grant application, to support the initiative to provide welcome bags for new residents and tenants in the community, to conceivably give funds to the library for their social justice discussion group speakers if funds were needed, to provide materials and resources for individuals to report community incidents of discrimination or harm. So that was more about once there's onboarding at the town level for, what's acceptable or not acceptable in terms of discrimination, et cetera, that then making sure that the community knows, employees and community members, like, if you experience discrimination or harm, like, what are you supposed to do about it? Like, what are your avenues up for that? And then there was money in there for childcare and possibly transportation vouchers, so people of limited means could participate on committees and boards. And this was one of the questions that this I presented to the select board, the idea that, there's a certain number of people who volunteer, and then there's a whole bunch of other people in town who don't. And one of the barriers that's cited is that people can't afford childcare or transportation to be going to 2-hour meetings a month in the evenings. And so the conversation, the select board, and again, this was almost 3 years ago now, was like, well, if we had money available to give to people for that, like, how would they get it? And I was like, I don't know, why don't you just have a pot of money and say to the community, like, hey, if this is a barrier, like, fill out a voucher and we'll pay you for your transportation and childcare costs. And the worst thing could happen is you get 100 people in the first month who ask for all the money and it's gone. And you're like, okay, that didn't work. Or maybe you get 2 people who use it over the course of the year and you get 2 new voices on committees who would have never had before. Those community outreach things, that was $3,000 in the grants just sitting there, because this committee has been busy working on the core values. It's not something the select board's taking up independently, so it's just sitting there. And then the last $2,000 was for metrics to begin process of equity mapping and data collection, which is something that might come out of the core values. We might start to get some of the information along the way, but that's just a little farther out there. So that's what the grant was for. This committee is using part of it in their work with Tabitha. There's other money available, which hopefully this committee will start to engage with and direct once you get the core values done, and then you create a work plan. Is that helpful? Maybe? I don't know. That was a very ambiguous head nod, Brian.
Yeah.
It was a massive information dump. Thankfully, I know exactly who to talk to if I like, what'd you say?
Yeah. I mean, I think what I heard maybe was that we're really kind of team core values right now. And that's our focus right now. And that the other pieces are things that there is money available to support when and if we get to, hopefully, when we get to that place.
But you might want
Um,
to consider inviting Amy Smith, the new community resource
Yeah.
person. You might want to start inviting her to the meetings.
Yeah.
Just because everything where the police might be involved, but it's not exactly criminal, like they're not arresting somebody necessarily, she's probably going to be handling that. She also will be sort of on the front line, so she might also be able to identify community needs that some of the funding could go toward.
That's
Yeah,
a great,
that's a good
because
idea. Yeah.
came up at the last meeting was concerned because Taylor from the hub had been the town's appointee to the committee, but she has had conflicts and hasn't been able to come. So Darla had reached out to Ian as interim to say, hey, are we getting a new person? Because we don't have a town liaison right now.
Mhm.
So maybe we could suggest Amy. That
Or
would be
just ask Amy.
Yes.
yeah, that would be a
Yes.
great.
Not wait,
a
let's
great-
just ask.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
That's great.
Anything else I can be supportive about? With Well, it's kind of like when you go to your personal trainer and they're like, okay, here's all the things you're going to do when you're not with me. You're like, thank you.
I mean,
Jess is, mhm.
I was just going to say, I think, you know, in trying, once the informal conversations are had and we have all of that information, I was thinking about reaching out to see if I could have an RA who has experience with Qualtrics, the survey software, and also doing data analysis. And so maybe what we could have the student do then is sort of put all that information together in lots of different formats that might help you understand it better. And then Tabitha maybe could help with, you know, how you might want to phrase different questions or, you know, different ways to ask things that might elicit the kind of response you want.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
well,
think that put us, oh, sorry.
I was gonna say, if you don't need anything else from me, I can hop off and scoot out so you can continue it.
Appreciate
Is that it? Are we done? Are
It
we
was good
done?
to see you, Tabitha.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Good to see y'all.
Thank you, Tabitha.
Okay,
Appreciate
take care,
you.
y'all. You
Thank
too.
you.
I think that put us just to new business, which we usually keep just the information swap on there, unless there were other things that I overlooked.
Should I also log out and then we'll just be in touch about next steps?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Okay,
you.
I'm
Good
gonna
night.
I'm going to reach out and try to locate an RA, and then I'll have them start attending the meetings too.
And
Oh.
sorry, so getting Amy, connecting with Amy, is that something that we should just do directly, or?
You should be
how-
able to just do it directly, but I'm also happy to facilitate if you'd feel more comfortable that way. She's really open. She's had a whole bunch of like town outreach meetings. She's looking for people to like reach out to her.
That's,
Oh.
I didn't hear anything about town outreach meetings.
Oh yeah, she had put some stuff. It was on either Front Porch Forum or the Addison Independent, like a come and meet with me. I think she was at the library or something.
Oh.
I didn't see that.
Yeah.
Well, this is why she needs you guys, right? You can help with this outreach.
I can send
But-
her an email. Her email is easy to find on the town website.
Town website, yes. But if you need any
Okay.
help, let me know.
Okay, no, I'll just
Thank you.
say, hey, we'd love for you to come to our next meeting.
Perfect. Okay, good night, everyone.
Good night, Jessica.
Bye.
For knowledge share, I had a few things for a change that that are kind of, I felt like they were kind of touched on things that we do. They're not necessarily 100%, but I put one in the email. The Vermont Civic Health Survey came out, which I'd never heard of a state doing this before. So I found that very interesting reading through some of that. And there's a section in there that specifically talks about volunteerism in Vermont, which I found particularly interesting around, who volunteers and who doesn't. And I just felt it might help inform a little bit about more as I'm reaching out to people, since I'm newer to Vermont. And then in the same Front Porch Forum, they also had a link to Vermont meeting law informational video, which I was sharing just because I didn't know a lot about, meeting law. California doesn't do anything like this. The meetings, people don't participate in government very much, and yeah, it's very different. So I'm trying to learn a lot. So just sharing that. And then in Front Porch Forum tonight, Middlebury College is doing a survey about Bristol infill, which I'd never heard the term before, but I guess
I think
that's,
Jess is part of that. Oh, she's left,
okay.
but yeah.
Construction for things like housing on areas that are already developed. So like if a parking lot becomes, I think they use this example, a parking lot becomes an apartment building or something like that. But it just seemed kind of fitting with a little bit of what we're doing. So I'm trying to put that into chat, but it's not going to let me.
What'd you say, Brian?
It's a quick survey. It's like 10 questions.
Yeah, I did it too. Oh yeah, it looks like it's not letting me
The
put it
infill
into
survey?
the chat.
It's quick. Yeah.
Mhm.
That one's quick. And then there was one from the school board.
Yeah.
Was it level up learning or something like that? That was another
Up for learning. Yeah.
up for learning.
Yep.
Yeah, just other ways that we can all participate and share information and
Yep.
yeah.
There's an annual conference that the Vermont Family Network is sponsoring for families and youth with disabilities and healthcare needs on April 8th. So I posted that to Front Porch Forum. So excited about that. Also today, I tuned into, I don't know if it was the opening session of the legislature of the House, but they were, they opened with reporting on probably 10 to 12 different bills that the House is bringing to committee to be considered, and almost all of them relate to protections that I think are a response to a lot of the executive orders that Tabitha was referencing. So that was interesting that committees are taking up bills for protections for.
They haven't actually proposed them yet, though. They're
No.
just
Yeah,
starting
they're
to.
gonna, and then they heard a presentation from the Secretary of Education on a proposal of significant changes to our education system to try to address the property tax increases and the fact that, a third of the budgets failed last year. And so, so that was really interesting as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is that recorded?
It must be, yeah,
Okay.
I'm sure. It was this afternoon. I watched it live on their YouTube channel, but yeah, I'm sure they record it. It was a pretty brief presentation, but yeah, I think we're going to see some significant changes. Some of it gets to sort of that idea of like hyper local control, but also the tension with the ability to make potentially challenging decisions at that level, and the need to make some systemic changes. Yeah.
All right. Anything else?
I guess maybe I didn't read far enough. Is this a new thing that we added to our monthly agenda as far as stuff we come across?
Say it again, Brian.
this piece that you both of you have gone through, is this, apparently I've missed this, and this is a part of the monthly agenda, is just, stuff that's important to us or we've come across to share, or?
Yeah, just information swap.
Well, I could think of a couple off the top of my head. Today was the point in time collection for homeless or
Yeah.
unhoused. I haven't seen what the data is, but every year around this time in January, state of Vermont, they collect, number of, homeless individuals, so they can report that back to the federal government. It looks like it's a process over the next couple of weeks. In fact, that's last year, this time I was actually in Montpelier giving testimony on homelessness, but they decided, I don't know if they're going to be doing something different at a different point, but I ended up not making it there this year. I intended to possibly be missing today's meeting. I will be going, provided my body holds up. I've had a couple injuries, to Montpelier next week for mental health awareness or mental health advocacy day.
Yeah.
Meet with a bunch of legislators and attend some of the meetings down that way or over that way.
Brian, did you see the new initiative on housing that Maria Weinberger is part of?
I was going to reference that. I can't remember the name of the program, but
Let's Build Homes, I think it
VHFA
is.
is kind of spearheading that. They were bringing that up a little bit today because I had my meeting with the Vermont State Housing Authority, and talking about things down the pipeline. They're concerned about the changes in Washington as far as overall funding for HUD, because a lot of the Section 8 funding comes directly from them.
Yeah.
So they're anticipating potential cuts and the ramifications for families, and it's not not looking good. Let's put it that way. Considering there's already a problem, we don't need to add to it, but we don't know where it's going to go. Anyway, that's all I got. I don't have anything cheery to share.
Anything else?
Got anything you want to share?
No.
Info or bad jokes or?
I'm on the Mountain Community Health Board, and one of the board members, he always tells a joke to start off every board meeting, and they're dad jokes, quote unquote dad jokes.
Yeah.
Mine are not good for this
Oh, they're not appropriate for this audience.
Well, we can turn off the recording and then you can
Yeah,
tell us. All right. Then I guess if you're ready to adjourn, we can call it at 8:18 is what my computer says. And I show our next meeting as February.
Clarify the date for your next meeting.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I show it as February 26th. Is that what everyone else had? And does that work for everyone?
Yep.
I'm going to assume yes.
Okay.
One thing before we do wrap up, as we were talking about the outreach, I don't know how to verbalize it right at the moment, but my social anxiety was kicking up on it, and I might have to reach out for some assistance in terms of whether it's help with brainstorming or actually collecting data, because as of right now, between Thursdays are typically board meetings, and then Monday, Wednesday, Friday I run peer support calls from 8 p.m. till whenever they get done. So I have a finite amount of time to actually help collect data, so I might need some assistance, and I just gotta figure out how.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, it sounded to me like it's less about numbers of folks and it's more about just starting to have a sense from different people we might be connected with in different communities to know what people value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
More or less just having conversations with our neighbors and people we meet in coffee shops and
yeah.
Great.
But just do what you can, Brian.
Yeah.
I just
Appreciate
figured I'd
that.
verbalize it before it became an issue, or if it was about to become an issue, like try to get ahead of things.
Yeah. You continually sound like the busiest person that I know, Brian. So
the good news is I did turn down
I know.
the I had it weighing heavily on me about joining the school board.
Yeah.
But when I did the balancing act, because I also just started classes back up at CCV, that I'm like, something would have to go, and too much that I want to try to do would have to go.
Mhm.
So I'm sticking with this. So appreciate your.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Porter, I hope you feel better. Brian, I know you said I feel like you said you weren't feeling too well, so I hope you feel better too.
Mostly it's been physical, but the heat here has been having some problems, even though it's a fairly new building. And so now I've got that. I don't know if it's my hypochondria is going in. Like I'm noticing I'm blowing my nose all day. I'm like, damn it, I don't want to get sick. Like I haven't gone anywhere in a few days. I haven't talked to anybody to get sick. So
There's a lot going around.
There is. Yeah.
I'm going to bed.
Good for you.
Good night, everyone.
take
Good
care, everybody.
night.
Good to see
Thank
you.
you.